In this video, we're going to filter based on a user's identity. This means based on how a user authenticates using a username and password, that will determine their level of access out of the network through the firewall. So there are two types of authentications that can be used to determine the user's identity. There is active authentication and there is passive authentication. Now this video will be focused on active authentication for user identity filtering. Active authentication means in order for a user to access resources that require routing through the firewall, the user must first open a web page which will redirect them to a web authentication portal where they must log in using the correct credentials. Then, based on how they log in, it will determine their level of access. Now, since we have integrated our Active Directory domain with our firewall, the users will be logging in using their Active Directory account and not some local account. Now, before we get into doing that, we will set up a few things to become more practical in our environment. So we will create different security profiles for our different Active Directory groups, which will be focused on our staff users and our contractor users. So to begin, let's go to Application Control under Security Profiles. Okay, we will create a new profile. And this will be used by our staff users. Okay, and in this particular profile, we want to deny storage backup like Dropbox. So we'll go up here and we'll select block. But our staff users will be able to access other applications and sites. So once we're done, let's go ahead and apply our changes. Next, we will make a copy of this profile, which will be used for our contractors group. And we'll call this contractors. Okay, and here we will still deny storage backup applications, but it would also include blocking any social media applications. Okay, let's also deny games as well. And once we're done, let's go ahead and apply our changes. Next, let's go to our security policies page. Here we will be adding two new policies that will filter based on a user's identity using active authentication. One for the staff group and the other for the contractors group. So let's create a new policy on this page. Okay, so any user from our LAN communicating out through the WAN, the source, it can be any IP address. We don't care which network our users come from because we will filter based on the user account. Therefore, for the source user, we will select the staff user group that we added in the last video, which is mapped to the staff Active Directory group in our domain. For the destination address, that will be any address on the internet. And of course, we will allow all services because we'll be filtering based on the applications that our staff users will be accessing. So under security profiles, we will enable application control and we will select the profile for our staff users. Also make sure that NAT is enabled, which it is always by default. And also we're going to include our custom SSL inspection profile that we created earlier in a different video. And we are done, so let's go ahead and save our changes. So as a recap, in the policy that we just created, any user who authenticates using an Active Directory account that is a member of the staff group, they will be allowed to access any application or site on the internet except for storage backup sites like Dropbox. We will now add a policy that would apply for our contractors. So once more, let's create a new policy here. For the flow from the LAN facing interface, communicating out to the WAN, which is where our internet is connected to, the source will be for any IP address, but the source user will be the contractors user group, which is mapped to the contractors Active Directory group in our domain. The destination will be for any or all IP addresses. We will allow for all services. And of course, make sure that NAT is enabled. Next, we will enable application control. And we're going to select the profile intended for our contractors. And let's also set the correct SSL inspection profile. And let's save our changes. Okay, so in that policy, any user who logs in as a contractor while trying to access the internet, they would not be allowed to play games, access social networking sites, and not access to storage backup related applications like Dropbox. For testing, let's go to our user computer who will be a staff user. Now this computer is not added to the domain. So when we launch a web browser, and let's try to access any website, you will see that we are redirected to a web authentication page requiring us to log in. So let's enter an account that is a member of the Staff Active Directory group. Okay, and now we are logged on successfully and we're sent to the site that we entered before, which was cisco.com. So now we should have access to social networking sites. Let's go ahead and confirm that very quickly. And we do, so we have access to facebook.com. However, if we try to access any storage backup site or application like Dropbox, oops. Okay, we get blocked as expected based on the policy that we have set up for our staff group. Now let's go to a computer that will be our contractor, and we will launch a web browser. So when we do that, it will redirect us to msn.com, but we are instead redirected to the web authenticated portal. So we'll be logging on this time using an account that is a member of the Contractors Active Directory group, which would be Amy Lynn's account. And now we're able to access that site. So as a contractor, social networking, storage, and game applications should be denied. Let's confirm this by going to, let's say, facebook.com. Okay, that gets blocked. And let's try to access a storage site like box.com. Great, and we also get blocked as expected for a contractor user in our environment. We can view the security statistics of our completed sessions by going to the security log section for application control. Here we are. And here we now see some usernames reflected, which is right over here, along with their IP address and what applications they tried to access that was blocked based on the security profile that we created for each of these groups. Furthermore, we can view the list of all authenticated users through our firewall based on what we configured, and that can be found by going to user and device, then to monitor here at the bottom, and then to firewall. So here we see 2 users that authenticated using active authentication. That means that they had to log on manually using their credentials before gaining any access out to the internet. So we see their username and even the group which use our LDAP profile that integrated with our Active Directory domain. We also have the option to de-authenticate any user if needed from this page. And that concludes this video for how you can filter based on a user's identity using an active authentication approach.